Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to formally welcome everyone to our annual Top 10 dinner. My name is Trenton Borum, Director of Student Services and one-third of our admin team here at Speedway High School. I am very humbled to have been a part of Speedway Schools for the past 17 years. Before we begin, I would like to recognize and thank the Lions Club for sponsoring this wonderful event, the ladies of Aramark for the deliciously prepared meal, and of course, our esteemed School Board of Trustees. Please stand or wave your hand as I say your name. School Board President Luke Bickle, Vice President Mrs. Laura DeGay, School Board Member Deborah Gonzalez, and School Board Member Mr. William Harding. School Board Secretary Mr. Thomas Smith is not present today, but I also wanted to make sure we recognized him as well. I would also like to thank our wonderful central office, Superintendent Mr. Kenneth Hall, our assistant superintendents, Mr. John Disney and Mr. Kyle Trebley, Dr. Kyle Trebley. And I also would like to introduce and thank our guidance department who are instrumental in putting together this program, Ms. Misty Davenport and Mr. Charles Bennett. Last but not least, it's okay to applaud, thank you. Last but not least, I would like to recognize my colleagues in our administrative team, Mr. Lucas Zartman, our principal, and Mr. James P. Claiborne, assistant principal. This evening is always one of the best times of the year. It allows our school community to recognize and honor both amazing students and phenomenal teachers. So cherish this evening as our top 10 students acknowledge their most influential educator. This is a time for celebration, reflection, and recognition. At this time, I'd like to invite Ms. Mary Sears to give our invocation for the evening.
I decided to use a traditional Irish blessing for the invocation. May the road rise up to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face, the rains fall soft upon your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand.
I would like to thank my lovely wife, Mrs. Tyra Borum, for making sure that I have the mic next to my mouth. I've been telling the kids all week, make sure you're speaking in the microphone. And she said when I put my head down, I kind of tail her off. So thank you, I appreciate you. Without further ado, thank you, Mary. I appreciate that beautiful invocation. Without further ado, we will begin our presentation. We will be starting from number 10 through number 1. And I would like to first welcome to the podium Mr. Kunlai Naco. Kunlai Naco, feel free to applaud. Kunlai Naco plans to attend IUPUI, where he will major in computer science. His esteemed educator that he is recognizing as his most influential educator this evening is Miss Elizabeth Denny, world language teacher at Speedway High School. Welcome, Kunlai and Ms. Denny.
Okay. Elizabeth the Great. I first met Miss Denny my sophomore year. She was new to Speedway and so was I, but she instantly made me feel at home. It didn't take long to recognize her genuine love for teaching. Ms. Denny does not simply teach to earn a living. She instead puts her heart and soul into every lesson to ensure that her students learn. That same passion Ms. Denny has for student learning, she also has in developing meaningful relationships with the students. I have confided in Ms. Denny when dealing with personal issues, and when I've done that, she's always given me thoughtful and sound advice. Now back to the Spanish. With Ms. Denny's help, my Spanish-speaking abilities have improved immensely, and due to her teaching, I'm well on my way to being fluent in Spanish, my third learning language. For those of you who may not know Ms. Denny as well as I do, her attitude towards lifelong learning is endless. Ms. Denny is always interested in learning about new cultures, new languages, and new experiences. It's not every day that you meet someone who can handle 6 languages at a time, as well as the complex structure of each of them. What I've learned is that Ms. Denny uses languages to break down barriers and further human relationships. Ms. Denny has been able to learn a lot of sentences in my native tongue, Yoruba, and she continues to learn Karen, Korean, Thai, and many other languages. Such dedication towards learning has made me a better student, peer, and person. Making it seem so easy has motivated me to one day break a record of languages. During my time in her class, my favorite memory occurred whenever I went for help. Many people, when approached for help, usually state their point of views while obscuring mine. Contrary to such people, Ms. Denny gave me the opportunity to explain my reasoning and proceeded to understand my thoughts. She focused on learning what I already knew and what I needed to improve. Recalling vividly, I struggled with the conjugation of irregular verbs in the preterite tense. Needing clarification, I asked Ms. Denny for help. Having understood, she handed me a list of verbs to conjugate. After handing it back, she graded them and provided me with ways to improve. By listening and comprehending my struggle, I can call Ms. Denny mi profesora favorita. Thank you. Senior year has proven itself to be the best so far. I'm grateful to have such prominent teachers, but most importantly, I appreciate the healthy relationships I've established with many of them. Even though Ms. Denny has taught me a lot about Spanish, she has also taught me this: learn to appreciate what you have in front of you. Take the chance to learn more than what is given to you, and don't stop learning. Her influence, as well as of others, has made me and will continue to direct me in the future. I'm grateful in more ways than one to have known Ms. Denny, and I hope that one day she would know my full appreciation. Thank you.
I know that from Kunlai that this is only the beginning of the amazing road that he has in front of him. I've learned a lot from him as well, that's helped to just even broaden my perspective on just Africa, specifically Nigeria. I hope that by the time that we continue to communicate, that my Yoruba will be very, very strong and we can have full conversation. So, Eshegon. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that wonderful speech, Kunlai. I remember when you enrolled years ago, and you were coming from Nigeria, and I told you that because you didn't have the credits, you were starting as a 9th grader, and you were so eager to learn and so excited to be able to continue your education here in America. And I just want to say thank you, Ms. Denny. I remember when Dr. Trebley and I interviewed you at Starbucks over the summer, and you have been a great hire for our school community. We appreciate you. Our next student that we will be honoring tonight is Mr. Alex Jensen. Alex will also be attending IUPUI and plans to double major in philosophy and computer science. His most influential educator is Mr. Jordan Deaver.
pushing water up a hill with a rake. In order to appropriately accredit character, one must keep in mind the consciousness of seemingly simple choices. Patience, for instance, is not something one is born with, it is something one must learn by 1, actively pursuing experiences which will provide wisdom, 2, having the empathy to put those lessons into context in one's own life, and 3, having the persistence to continue to practice those lessons consistently. There are lessons such as these which I have learned in Mr. Deaver's classes, and it is this reason that Mr. Deaver has had such a profound impact on the way that I write, the way that I think, and the principles by which I judge my daily actions. Mr. Deaver has been teaching myself, along with the class of 2018, for 3 years in a row, and has undoubtedly not only witnessed the growth of many of us, but also played an essential part. I think of my own life a year or 2 back and remember pivotal moments that I had within myself in Mr. Deaver's class. Realizations about how I think or why I do things. I remember an activity in ethics in the 11th grade, which happened to coincide with the budding interest in philosophy I had. Now philosophy is my major. In Mr. Deaver's class, there was always a clever solution to strive for, a way to keep an activity more well-rounded and insightful than he could have made it. Creativity was never stifled and always rewarded. For growing minds, which were often too full of themselves for their own good, there was never a shortage of opportunities to open them, giving them new perspective and cultivating true growth. For me, this meant a newfound appreciation for literature, which opened my eyes to the limitations of pure reason and the vital importance in everyday life for empathy, for how else do we make ourselves wiser. By learning from the way that Mr. Deaver conducts his classes and motivates his students, I began to understand the importance of having intrinsic confidence as a writer, yes, but more importantly, understanding that the affirmation of others plays a part in each of our lives, but cannot be paramount, even if it might mean a lower letter grade. It meant learning how to establish goals and be stoic enough to understand the steps necessary to accomplish them and how not to regress after failure. Mr. Deaver has played a pivotal role in my personal journey for truth, and I appreciate and admire the patience and endurance that teaching the same, often unappreciative class for 3 years has taken, since after all, patience is a conscious choice. I wish both him and the classes he teaches in the future the best, that they reap the full benefits of his wisdom, and by extension, that he would be fulfilled both as an educator and as a person. Despite our many ideological differences, I've made it a personal goal of mine to act with comparable demeanor and level-headedness that he possesses, although I'm not quite sure I'm ready to shave my head yet.
I think that's probably like an 8 on the AP rubric. Mr. Dorman, fellow English teacher, you want to evaluate that? I appreciate this award, honor. It's always humbling to hear students talk about you in such a flattering way. The thing I most appreciate about Alex is his pursuit of knowledge. I mean, he is coming to me every day and testing whether I've read something or whether I've thought about something that he might have said a week ago or a month ago or a year ago, and I got to dig deep. He keeps me on my toes, and I appreciate that about him. But yeah, his pursuit in all avenues of knowledge and trying to formulate his arguments is something I value tremendously, and I think that's why our relationship is really solid. And I wish him well at IUPUI, and I'll be there to help him along the way.
Thank you, Alex and Mr. Deaver. I can concur that seeking of knowledge with Alex since his freshman year. He has always had a plan to succeed and achieve. He skipped math classes a couple of years back because he was yearning to take higher level math classes when he reached his senior year. We met with his dad and we set up a plan for him to be able to achieve that goal. And so Alex, continue to go and make your mom and dad proud. And again, Mr. Deaver, we appreciate all that you have done for our students as well. Our next student that we will be honoring is Miss Maria Galvez. Miss Maria Galvez will be attending Indiana University, and she will be studying human biology. Her teacher that she is recognizing is Mrs. Becky Kilgore. This is the first time she's been recognized at one of these top 10 recognitions. You can clap. And she is our AP Calculus teacher. Come on up.
leaving it all on the slope field. Throughout my 4 years of high school, I have had Mrs. Kilgore for 2. The first interaction we had was my 9th grade year. She was my pre-AP geometry teacher first period. The only reason I remember which period I had her for 3 years ago is because I rarely ever showed up to her class. Some of my fellow classmates told me she had asked the class, "Does Maria even go here anymore?" Which was definitely not one of my proudest moments. Nothing against her, I was just very irresponsible and had an awful habit of oversleeping. I knew I had made a bad first impression, but what can I say? I was a dumb freshman. Oh, my apologies. What I meant to say was I was a silly freshman, as Mrs. Kilgore would correct. Going into my senior year, I was excited to take AP Calculus, but I feared Mrs. Kilgore would remember my inability to show up to class on time and wouldn't think highly of me whatsoever. Either way, I wasn't going to let that affect which math class I took. I knew she was a great teacher, and I loved math, so I knew it wouldn't be too bad. Although she might have not thought highly of me my freshman year, I was definitely going to try my hardest not to let her down this year. One of the first things she taught us was the ABCs of APC are CDE, meaning the ABCs of AP Calculus are consistent daily effort. And without consistent daily effort, one probably wouldn't reach their full potential, especially in calculus. So I took this advice. I actually showed up to class every single day of the year, if I'm not mistaken, and consistently tried my best in her class. I think my hard work definitely showed, especially on tests and quizzes. I grasped the material pretty fast, and calculus quickly became one of my favorite classes. I think Mrs. Kilgore really noticed my hard work and how I had changed a lot from freshman year to now, because she told me how much I've progressed and grown as an individual in those 4 years, and that was one of the best things I had heard. I don't think I could have done so well in AP Calculus if it wasn't for Mrs. Kilgore. Her amazing teaching ability, determination to help all her students, her positive reassurance, and her desire to find different ways to make sure every single person understood the material motivated me while allowing me to succeed in her class. She's caring, attentive, funny, solicitous, etc. So many different words could describe her, but in reality, she's just a wonderful person, and I'm so glad to have met her at Speedway. Another thing she taught me was to leave it all on the slope field, metaphorically speaking. But it's definitely one of the most valuable lessons any teacher or person can provide someone with. No matter what I'm doing, whether it's academic or practical, I need to leave it all on the slope field. Give it all or nothing. Mrs. Kilgore has taught me several important and influential things that I will take on to college and to the rest of my life, and I'm very grateful for that. Because of her, I will be attending Indiana University, but instead of just majoring in human biology, I will be double majoring in human biology and mathematics, due to my love for calculus and math in general. So, Mrs. Kilgore, thank you for not only being my teacher, but for being such a wonderful role model and influential person in my life. I am honored to have had you as my educator.
I always feel like this is not as easy as it looks, because as you're driving in, you're thinking about what you might say, and then you hear what they say, and it's all out the window then. Several of the things she said, I had to smile because I thought the same thing. I've been fortunate that a lot of kids here, I got to work with them twice, and it's really fun to see their growth from freshman year to senior year, not just academically, but as a person. And Maria's not just a scholar, she's an athlete. She has given her best every day in my class, best attitude, best effort, best behavior, and I thank her for that. And it's been fun to see. Thank you for remembering the ABCs. It's always good that somebody's heard them. In my class, if you watched her, you would be impressed because she works hard, she works well with others, she's not content to just have it done to say it's done. She wants to be able to ask, could I have done it this way? I did this, is that all right? But most importantly, I love that she can smile, because it will be a shock, but not every student can smile in calculus class. and she can, and I thank her for that so much.
One thing to add, Mrs. Kilgore, about Maria is that she's very kind-hearted. She actually escorted a sophomore, to prom by the name of Taj Borum. So she was kind enough to allow him to attend the prom with her. So we thank you for that, Maria. Where'd she go? Okay, thank you. And Mrs. Kilgore, as you know, I talk with you all the time, and I've known you since I've been here at Speedway. Again, we appreciate the years of service that you have provided for our students in math, as well as just continuing to build relationships with our kids in the AP Calculus course. So we appreciate you as well. Our next student that we will be honoring tonight is Miss Joanna Berry, who will be attending DePaul University and majoring in political science. Her esteemed educator that she is recognizing tonight is Mr. Lee Shively, our U.S. history teacher.
A year in the 154. As a sophomore, the first two AP classes I took were AP Biology and AP United States History. Taking college-level courses sounded daunting, but once I began with APUSH, it became clear to me that my experience would not be as difficult as expected. Through firsthand experience, I learned of Mr. Shively's abundant dedication to ensuring his students had not just a basic understanding of the history of our country, but also the ability to analyze that material and describe its impacts. Even if I may not have realized it at the time, I now see APUSH as one of the first seeds planted in the direction of my career path as a political science major. That class reinforced my interest in history, something I surely inherited from my father, thanks Dad, but also helped to introduce me to my passion for helping others, both through the content and through Mr. Shively's example, even if I had to endure assignments including the cursed green sheet. Mr. Shively never stopped making an effort towards keeping the lectures entertaining, even if some of his students were not completely engaged. This I see in the class he teaches while I am his teacher's aide as well. Be it AP or regular history class, Mr. Shively's effort towards every student's success is the same, and that patience and commitment are both admirable traits that make him more than an average teacher. Mr. Shively's influence did not cease at the end of my sophomore year as I became his teacher's aide this year. With a class schedule consisting entirely of AP courses, I knew this period would be a break from the stressful onslaught of such classes, and that has proven to be true to this day. I should also add that when he first saw my schedule, the helpful words of advice Mr. Shively gave to me were, "Do you want to hate your life?" Every time I enter his classroom, I know my mood will be brightened without fail through the inevitable sass, jokes, and carefuls that Mr. Shively will throw my way, even if that may include mockery at my expense over my love for Star Wars or the Beatles. Despite his joking demeanor, though, Mr. Shively proves that he can be a source of consolation when the need arises. On more than one occasion, I have come into his class visibly stressed about classwork and the typical senioritis woes. Senior year tends to be an extraordinarily stressful time, and Mr. Shively has been an exceptional blessing who has remained supportive and aided in making my last year of high school as enjoyable as possible. A somewhat indirect way he ensured this was the handful of times he and a fellow teacher, Mr. Deaver, bought breakfast for another student and myself on Friday mornings this year. It was not done in the name of favoritism. Instead, it was a kind gesture towards their teacher aides and a means for the four of us to exchange banter and begin our Fridays on a high note. Those mornings I will cherish forever, as they were simple tidbits that often set the tone for my day into the weekend, and are indicative of the passion Mr. Shively has for establishing genuine relationships with his students, for which I am extremely thankful. At one point during this year, when speaking about another teacher, Mr. Shively mentioned the fact that he had taken note of this teacher's interpretation of teaching as a service and not just a job. Mr. Shively told me that this was something that pushed him to approve of that teacher's hiring, and that perspective inspires me because he himself also embodies it without a flaw. Mr. Shively is dedicated to making sure every student learns something in his class, be it a better work ethic, a historical fact, or a life lesson. I'm blessed enough to have learned an abundance of all three from him, and can only hope to be as inspirational as someone as he has been to me. Thank you.
Ms. Kilgore, you mentioned the curveball, so the mentioning of the service to my colleagues here tonight, obviously we are, whether we recognize it or not, in the service industry, and so I do appreciate your efforts every day. You know, it's funny, in my 11 years at Speedway, one thing that's really come to my knowledge is siblings. You know, I'll have an older sibling and a younger sibling, and just how two kids growing up in the same house with the same parents can be totally different. For instance, Amelia Berry, Joanna's big sister I had several years back, was just the kindest, sweetest, happiest student I'd ever had. But on a serious note, Joanna embodies everything you'd want in a student and more. She's hardworking. She doesn't quit even when the results initially are not what she wanted. But there's so much more that I think of her as a person, her convictions. She knows what she believes as a high school senior, which is just very impressive to me. And she's willing to put herself out there to defend those beliefs. And she wants what's best for people. She led a voter registration drive last week. I don't know that had ever happened at our school before. And so you know, her help this year and the TA side has been simple errands, but it's been so much more. As she mentioned, the banter back and forth. She can deal with my sass. I told her today, if eye rolls could kill, I would have died today. And she said, you would have died 2 years ago. But in the end, you know, I mentioned siblings when I started, and I think of my own children. We have 3 now. The 2 oldest, though, just night and day at times. But our oldest is a little girl who's headstrong, intelligent, and doesn't take no for an answer. And I see her in you, and I can only hope she turns out just like you have. So thank you.
Mr. and Mrs. Berry, again, great job. I have had the pleasure of knowing your daughters and getting to know your son here at the high school. And as Mr. Shively said, Amelia and Joanna are different spirits, but both very, very kind, committed, and service-oriented people. So, again, great job. Mr. Shively, how many times has this been now? Oh, okay, you lose count? All right, well, good deal. Again, appreciate all the connections and relationship building that you do with our students each and every day. Our next student that we will be recognizing is Miss Katlyn Sears. She will be attending the University of Indianapolis, majoring in psychology. And the esteemed educator that she is recognizing today as her most influential is Mr. Lucas Zartman, principal of Speedway High School.
John Wooden's definition of success. Anyone who knows me can tell you how much I love Speedway. I always emphasize that more often than not, students take the school for granted. As an outsider, I can confirm that Speedway is extraordinary. I could go on, but simply, Speedway is unique because of the passion its staff has, and Mr. Zartman has led by example in this feat. He truly inspires me and many others to work harder, and that is why I chose to bring Mr. Lucas Zartman to this dinner. I'm going to paint you a picture. Last year, around this time, I sat in Computer Lab 227 for 6th period journalism. It was the end of junior year, and I was running out of article ideas. Mr. Dorman proposed I do the following: interview assistant principal Lucas Zartman, who is about to become principal. I want to make one thing perfectly clear. In high school journalism, the scariest thing to do is an interview. On a limited amount of information, you have to produce a list of questions to ask a stranger. And Mr. Zartman was a stranger. I'm an avid rule follower, so other than hellos in the hallway, I had never said 2 words to him. After this meeting, however, my life was changed for the better. Mr. Zartman made me feel comfortable talking to him. He gave me words of wisdom. In particular, he told me that he follows John Wooden's definition of success, and though he didn't get it verbatim, it has changed the way I look at my life. Today, Mr. Zartman, I'm going to get it verbatim. Quote, "Success is peace of mind, which is the direct result of self-satisfaction in knowing you made an effort to do your best to become the best that you are capable of becoming." Last year, I told my peers that I was ecstatic to graduate with him as my principal. This has not changed. If anything, it's grown stronger. In the year following this interview, I have sat in Mr. Zartman's office on multiple occasions, but as I said before, I never get in trouble. Instead, Mr. Zartman and I talk about the things I see in my school. What are my peers concerned about? I think it is important for any leader to hear the concerns of students, and that is one thing that has been on my mind, Mr. Zartman told me. How do we create a platform that allows students to voice concerns and allows us, as the adults in the building, to work with them to resolve those? Because, in the end, we are here for our students. We really are. We want an experience that, in the end, gives them the skills they need to be successful, whatever their next endeavor is, when they leave here. And obviously, the more that we work together to accomplish that, the better the end result will be. But that's not all. He has shown a genuine interest not only into my insight into the minds of my peers, but into my future aspirations. Every meeting he asked me for an update about college and scholarship applications. This is a rare engagement to find in a teacher, let alone an administrator. Mr. Zartman, this is as good a time as ever to properly thank you for everything you do. You've inspired me to work harder. Every day you come in here ready to work and expect your students and staff to do the same. Undoubtedly, you have improved this school, and on behalf of the student body, thank you so much. I am eternally grateful.
Katie, you're too kind, but I'll take it. Katie talked about being frightful as a student going into an interview. Let me tell you, as an assistant principal, and Mr. Claiborne can probably attest to this, there's probably nothing more fearful than a student asking you to be interviewed. You worry a little bit about what the questions might entail, but when she came, and I'm going off, I had some prepared remarks here, but I'm going off cuff a little bit, which is against my better judgment. But when Katie came in for interview, I was immediately blown away. The level of thought she had put into her questions, I thought was astounding. And I got to admit, even after talking with her and answering those questions, I was still a little bit scared before that article came out, because you don't know, if you're going to fear anything, fear the pen. But when I read it, I was even more impressed. And the more I've got to know Katie through the year, the more impressed I become. And because of that, I will say it, obviously I'm truly honored and very appreciative of the thanks. But it's her that I should be thanking. It's truly students like her that makes Speedway such a great place. And it's truly students like her that make me enjoy coming to work every morning. So, Katie, I want to thank you. Thank you for helping make your senior year not only great for yourself, but for your fellow classmates. Please know that your insights and your advice that you've shared with me throughout the year is very appreciative. And after getting to know you, I am fully confident that whatever you set your mind to, I know you're going to be successful. Thank you again.
Thank you, Katlyn. Thank you, Mr. Zartman. That was a very heartfelt speech, and again, we appreciate both of you. This is Mr. Zartman's, as he said, first year as principal, and to be recognized at our top 10 recognition has to truly be an honor. He's a much stronger man than I am, because I would probably be in tears. So, again, great kind words, Ms. Katlyn Sears, for recognizing our school leader. We appreciate that. Our next student that we will be calling to the podium is Mr. Thomas Wall. He will be attending Michigan Technological University, and he will be majoring in rail transportation engineering. He is recognizing Mr. Tim Kurtz, science teacher here at Speedway High School.
Thanks, Katlyn, for the tough act follow-up. Holding hands and singing Kumbaya. Throughout my years of learning, I have never had a better relationship with a teacher than with Mr. Kurtz. I first met Mr. Kurtz in my pre-AP biology class at the beginning of my freshman year. We quickly found something in common, as this was the first year at Speedway High School for the both of us, and we had to learn the ropes together. Mr. Kurtz always welcomed feedback from his class in hopes of finding ways to improve his teaching. He wasn't afraid to challenge his AP classes and to treat them like college-level courses, spending a majority of his time lecturing. I was never once bored of his lectures. His experience in the field was unparalleled, and he had many jobs in the field, such as testing water for landfills. He always had a current event or a story to go along with his lectures to keep his students interested while giving them knowledge as well. During the day, at least one topic he touched on would pique my interest at some point. A specific instance I remember in AP Environmental Science, where we were learning the water table. Mr. Kurtz's experience as a building code inspector, he went to the new house of a lovely couple who had just recently built their house in a valley. While in winter their plumbing was fine, but when spring came, their toilets would no longer flush because of their the water table was higher than the elevation of their plumbing, and the couple would have to move into a new house with the old one being a total loss. Along with Mr. Kurtz's amazing methods of teaching, he didn't necessarily ensure that his students knew the required material for the AP test. Mr. Kurtz always tried to ensure that his students would leave the classroom as better people as well. He always pushed his class as one where learning should become before grades and rewards thoughtful reflection, leading to one of his popular sayings of "Why don't we all just hold hands and sing Kumbaya?" in hopes to stir some of his less motivated students into learning at least one thing in class that day. Mr. Kurtz was not only my biology teacher, but he was also my academic team coach. In my experience with him, he always strives to bring out the strengths of all the individual team members and to make a roster that works well under any circumstances. Since joining the academic team as a sponsor, he has helped our science team immensely by pushing them further and giving them insight that can't be found in a book. Through all this insight, Mr. Kurtz is not only a wonderful science teacher, but a mentor in all things related to becoming a better person. Thank you, Mr. Kurtz.
We worked it out. We put some drainage in there for those of you with a continuing story. I don't know who that guy was he was talking about, but he seems pretty neat. Again, I'm always appreciative and humbled by experiences such as this and getting an opportunity to work with Thomas. One thing that you may not know is another thing that we have in common is my son is now working through the Scouts, and Thomas will receive his Eagle Scout this Sunday, right? And so as I was thinking of these things, I was thinking about the characters, because we're not necessarily, you love your topic, you love your subject, and I love science dearly. I could go on for hours, as you know, and I do. But I also we're communicators, and it's about the story, the power of the story, and then the caution of one story, and so we try to give them multiple, and so I really appreciate that. But for him, just a few of the the scout, being trustworthy and loyal and cheerful, obedient sometimes, and everybody's got to have a little fun once in a while. But all those things that he embodies, that I'm extremely proud of him as a young man as well as an academic. And so, Thomas, thank you. Thank you for the young man you've become.
Thank you, Mr. Kurtz, and thank you, Thomas. What Mr. Kurtz just described is the art of teaching, being able to teach students content while also fostering relationships. And Thomas, I have to say, when you weren't in my part of the alphabet, so you weren't a student that I met with regularly, but I called you this summer because your schedule was not working. And we spoke this summer. You were interested in taking Advanced Physics 2, you and another student. And again, this just attests to the types of things that we try to do for students to accommodate their goals and their aspirations. So you were very willing to work through your schedule to still be able to accommodate the Advanced Physics 2 course. I appreciate your patience and being able to be in the Physics 1 class with the other student that you worked with. And that just, again, is a testament to your willingness to continue to strive for greatness. So we thank you again for those kind words from Mr. Kurtz, and thank you, Mr. Kurtz, for all that you do for our students as well. Our next student that we will be bringing to the podium is Miss Christina Elet. She will be attending Ball State University, and she will be majoring in architecture. The teacher that she is recognizing tonight as her most influential educator is Miss Katie Connolly Bush, a sixth grade elementary teacher at Fisher Elementary.
There is an old proverb that says, every child's life is like a piece of paper on which every passerby leaves a mark. During my 13 years in the Speedway school system, I've had many teachers leave a mark on me, for which I'm grateful. But the biggest and most formative mark that was left was that made by my sixth grade teacher. The day that Mrs. Bush came in to meet all the sixth grade students is still clear in my mind. She went around talking about what books we've already read and what we wanted to study in the future. I remember the excitement after the news was released that we would have a new class called the 5th and 6th grade academy. I remember even clearer the moment I found out I was going to be a student in this class. Like all first days, the first day of the academy was a bit tumultuous. Mrs. Bush introduced us to the classroom and how she would run things on a daily basis. The first week into the year, I craved the setting of the traditional classroom, something that I'd gotten used to, and memorized structure. However, Mrs. Bush had presented a new way of learning, one that didn't involve textbooks or restrictive tests. She encouraged us to explore our thoughts and cultivate them into meaningful projects and ideas. She taught us to look at the world with an open mind. She also had an entire library in her room dedicated a full hour each day for all of us to read. Before this time, I never was really interested in reading, until she introduced me to a young adult collection of books called the Percy Jackson series. The protagonist, a young boy named Percy, battling age-old Greek monsters in modern times, led me on a path that molded me into a curious young student. It was during those hour-long sessions that I first became entranced by a story. As the minutes ticked by, the classroom walls slipped away and the marks on the page came alive. I fell in love with the ancient Grecian characters and setting, and from then on, those sessions didn't seem nearly long enough, and I now had a never-ending reading list that is still continuing on to this day. I have Mrs. Bush to thank for all of this. Her adamant push for me to read made me the student I am today. It was this that taught me the self-discipline, perseverance, and determination which not only makes a successful student, but one who is able to go above and beyond what they are asked to do. Her push helped me fully understand the value of knowledge. And as I'm preparing to graduate and go on to college, I know I'll forever be grateful for my sixth grade teacher and her mark on me that pushed me to take charge of my education. I hope that one day I will make such an inspiring mark on someone else.
I was not aware I should wear waterproof mascara, so sorry, that was very sweet. I'm currently teaching 4th grade, but I had the pleasure of working with Christina in that 5th and 6th grade split, and like Christina said, it was it was a different year with lots of projects, and I have really great memories of that class, and in particular, Christina. After 5 or 6 or 7 years, you do forget the day-to-day things that happen back in elementary school, but you remember what's at the core of a person. And thinking back to my time with Christina, I remember her being incredibly hardworking. I mean, I would look at her and her head was down and she was focused and doing what she needed to do. And clearly she is still working hard and doing great. In the honors school at Ball State University, that's a huge deal. I'm really proud of you, and thank you for your kind words, Christina. I look forward to seeing what you're going to do.
Thank you, Mrs. Bush and Christina. I am always impressed when a student recognizes a student, when a student recognizes a teacher, I apologize, from elementary school. As Mrs. Bush mentioned, they have a lot of experiences. A lot of times when they get to high school, the most immediate memory is, of course, of their high school teacher. So to recognize a teacher from 6th grade just goes to show the impact teachers have on our students' lives. When I think of Christina, Mrs. Bush mentioned that she was a hard worker. She has a quiet strength. My interactions with her and just working with the top 10 presentation and talking with her throughout this, her 4 years of high school, just briefly. Again, she's not in my part of the alphabet, so it wasn't a daily interaction, but she's always exuded a quiet strength. And we are very excited to see what you go on and do as you move on with your future endeavors. All right, our next student that we'll be calling up to the podium is Mr. Cory Leander. He will be attending IUPUI and will be majoring in mathematics. And the teacher he is recognizing is Mrs. Nancy Harrison, health and PE teacher, who I must also say is retiring this year after 50 years of service to Speedway schools.
The true career of an educator. Ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle once remarked, "Educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all." Over these past 4 years at Speedway High School, I have learned a great deal, cementing my love and passion for learning. However, it was not often that my heart was taught something new, as Aristotle hoped. Those lessons would normally be saved for at-home life experiences and even events yet to occur. But Ms. Harrison would shatter those expectations. I met Ms. Harrison as a freshman in health. It would be then that I met my most influential educator. Teaching health to freshmen is no walk in the park, as I'm sure you know, Ms. Harrison. With a mounting curriculum and large class sizes, Ms. Harrison had to pick the most important topics to teach, but it was not the normal mundane lecture that one would expect from her. For Ms. Harrison, one would not just learn the bone system mnemonic that's so successfully stuck with me these last 4 years, nor the different types of cancer or the different body systems. Nope, every class Ms. Harrison would always impart, at least on me, a life lesson, telling your parents you love them every day, being truthful, and more broadly, being kind. I would watch her patience with the many students in my class who were not proficient in English. I would listen to her inquire about students' lives on her own accord and show deep interest in their well-being. I would watch her patience with the many students in my class, and I would even listen to her offer advice to many students with troubled home lives. It was through these actions that I would learn to be a better me. However, more directly, Ms. Harrison would challenge me to be my best self. She would challenge me to reach for my dreams, constantly inquiring about my career path, my grades, and my home life. Ms. Harrison would always show her true desire to see me succeed. It is this love for her students that I admire most. A common theme should be present by now. This is an educator who cares about her students, a true educator, and their well-being and futures. Her hope to impart a kindness on each of us students reflects a worldview not universally held by educators. It's one of those de facto responsibilities of every teacher to make each student a better person while also helping them learn more about the world. You might pause and ask yourself if those are one and the same thing. That's what has made Ms. Harrison so successful in her career, her kindness. So what are my takeaways? I will never forget carpals, metacarpals, phalanges. I will always remember when all else fails, resort to kindness. And I think we can all agree you're a shining example of a youth educator, Ms. Harrison, so thank you for your 50 years to Speedway High School, service to Speedway High School, and thank you for holding fast to your duty as a teacher.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Cory for those kind words, and I'm glad he remembered some of them. I have appreciated his help and thoughtfulness over all these years. I also want to thank the Lions Club for their support to the school, town of Speedway, all these years that I've been here, and hosting the Top 10 tonight. Congratulations to all the Top 10 students, their special teachers, and to their families. I think it's so important that we honor these academically superior students. I have so many memories of these 4 years with Cory. As many of you know, Cory is a very unique student. From being very academically gifted individual to an individual who also shares many of my own interests. As most of you know, I love our country and wear something red, white, and blue every day. As a freshman, Cory was in my AC period also, and during one session concerning career choices and employment interviews, I had spoken about connecting to the interviewer. Something that would remind that interviewer about them when they walked out. After asking the class what they would remember about me, they said red, white, and blue. Later, when Cory was interviewing for a job, he came and asked if I might have an American flag pen. I gave him a small pen of the American flag, and off he went to his interview. New job. I am sure that it was his magnificent personality that secured this position, but deep down I will always hope that that little American flag pen helped. Cory, just in case you need another one for your next interview. Cory and I have also connected through our interest in astronomy, space exploration, the unexplained, UFOs, Area 51, and fishing. Cory, you can borrow any of my sci-fi movies anytime. You still need to watch the originals of The War of the Worlds, Invasions of the Body Snatchers, Psycho, and don't forget The Shining. Oh, I just happen to have my copy of Invasion of the Body Snatchers right now that you may borrow.
No way.
I wanted you to have an enlarged Harrison rules for the graduate, just in case you might forget any of them. Cory?
Oh, Miss Harris, you know I need these.
Cory, thank you again so very much for this honor. As a token of our friendship, here is a little present to you, your own red and white blue. I have a flag for him over there. Hang it always properly and proudly. And a little something to explore old things at the main attraction, which I found out that is one of his favorite shopping places that I guess Cory and I have a good connection with junk and old things. And I have to say one other time, Cory said he really enjoyed talking to older people. And so I assume that's why he liked to come and see me and talk to me, because I was the oldest person around. So thanks again for everything. And remember, I will always love you.
Love you too, Miss Harrison. Thank you, Miss Harrison. On the boat.
have to just say that again, 50 years of service to our students. And I would not be surprised if Mrs. Harrison is invited back to one of these programs in future years, even though she will be retiring this year. She mentioned that Cory was a unique student, and I can attest that Cory is definitely a unique student. He is a gifted and a talented student. And I can remember, you may not remember this, Cory, but you came out of Mrs. Harrison's PE and health class, actually you and Alex, and you came to my office and you wanted to map out how would you make it to this event 4 years from now. And I want to say, obviously, both you and Alex have achieved that goal. So you guys have always set high expectations for yourselves. And again, I want you to continue to do well, Cory, and continue to make your family proud. All right. Our next student that we will be bringing to the podium is Miss Sydney Smith. Come on up. Miss Sydney Smith will be attending Indiana University. She will be majoring in English, and she is recognizing her most influential educator tonight, Mr. Derek Dorman, English teacher at Speedway High School.
A silver lining. This year has been a struggle, no doubt. With 5 AP classes, a job, and extracurriculars, I've had a lot on my plate. Through my procrastination, Mr. Dorman has been by my side. Ever faithful, he would write page-long recommendations in less than 10 minutes with a 24-hour deadline hovering over our heads. The words poured through the keyboard while I sat there biting my nails and stressing because, once again, I waited last minute to ask for a letter of recommendation. And I'm kind of a shy person, and I don't like to include myself a lot in the period that I TA in for Mr. Dorman, mostly because I'm working on other homework. But Mr. Dorman always finds ways to include me. He's used my projects as examples or guidelines for the students, even though I find them quite cringy. And he asked me questions to stir discussions among the freshman class. He even managed to work my job at Chipotle into one of his lessons. With all the stress of being a senior and dealing with college and homework, I could rely on the fact that I had a 50-minute block to decompress. 6th period has been interesting, to say the least. Trying to gain control over the freshmen is a really tough task, but Dorman manages to do it every single day. And there was this one day that nothing really seemed to be working. Now, most every student that's been invited to this top 10 dinner has had Mr. Dorman and knows that every Monday is our SSR day, where we read books silently. So on this particular day, the class was extra talkative and unwilling to listen or reason. So Dorman came up with a plan involving good cop, bad cop. Now, Dorman made a big show of leaving the room, but the class kind of disregarded it until Mr. Deaver came and just stuck his head in the doorway, and then the rest of him came in, and he kind of just stood there, and he stared at them. Now, he said a few ominous words, then left, leaving an air of unease with the students. And having the role of good cop meant I had to talk with them about listening to their teachers and about my own experiences as a freshman. I'm sure several of them brushed my words off, but there were a few who took what I said to heart. And when Mr. Dorman walked in, they were quietly reading. It's been a different experience working with Dorman instead of being where the freshmen sit. I get an inside look at the inner workings of lessons, work behind the scenes for the yearbook team, and assist in making the process easier for them. Being Dorman's TA means being included in every class and sport he's involved in. Mr. Dorman, it seems only fitting that I should pick you to bring to this dinner. I started my freshman year English course with you and wound up ending my senior year with the same course except from a different standpoint. Thank you for helping me throughout all of high school, for letting me get out of the classroom every once in a while, for dealing with my procrastination and writing recommendations on the spot. Your enthusiasm for teaching English and willingness to help students has motivated me to pick a career I'll love throughout the entirety of it, as you love teaching. Thank you.
Mr. Deaver, we pulled that good cop, bad cop thing off pretty good, didn't we? Sydney, you may not know this, and certainly you guys that have me in class don't know this, but when I was your age, I was incredibly shy. And now I'm like I am now. All right? But I was not like that at all. I was, okay? Let me just tell you why and also let me tell you why it only takes 10 minutes to type something up. Mr. Ringham, my high school typing teacher, we had typing class. Brilliant, but it doesn't take long to write up wonderful words about wonderful people. And Sydney's right there at the top of the heap. Let me tell you one other thing that's neat, and then I'll stop talking. For 3 years, Sydney would come by in the hallway as a freshman and a sophomore and a junior. And I try to be outgoing in the hallway now. Again, that's counter to the shy thing. Every single time she walks by, knuckle bump. Just to say hi, to check in, classy person. I'm hurt now. I don't have much feeling in my right hand anymore, so I think the knuckle bumping stopped, but we've moved it up a notch. And I can't say enough about Sydney, the peers in here tonight. She embodies the Speedway way. And for that, I thank you very much, Sydney. Congratulations.
I have to adjust this, Mr. Dorman. I'm sorry. Let me bring that down a notch. I never would have thought of you as a shy individual, so that is some interesting news. Again, Sydney, appreciate those words you shared about Mr. Dorman. You have obviously done extremely well. Your parents have a lot to be proud of. And again, I haven't said this yet because I was saving it to the end, but I think it is probably a good time to say right now. We want to thank or give our parents a round of applause for nurturing and helping our students along. So, parents, we thank you for all that you have done for your students and entrusting them within our school. So we really appreciate that. Our next person that will be coming to the podium is our valedictorian, Miss Mary Sears. Yep, you can head on up. The educator that she is recognizing today is Mr. Nick Beard, social studies teacher at Speedway High School.
Motivation, innovation, and education, Mr. Beard's 3 specialties. Mr. Beard was the teacher that everyone had something positive to say about. This was my perception of him before I had him as a teacher. Knowing that he was a football, basketball, and track coach, I expected him to be somewhat serious and strict as a teacher. I couldn't have been more wrong. I had Mr. Beard for law education and sociology my sophomore year. Mr. Beard was bursting with energy. He came to class every day with so much enthusiasm about what he was teaching us that day, he could hardly contain himself. No matter the day, he came to class with the same positive attitude. He made the content we were learning entertaining by telling us stories. Some of his favorites are the time he and his sister, almost but not really, pushed his other sister out of the window, when he ran away from home, what his cat did last night, the time he accidentally called a drive-through worker babe, or when he was attacked by elementary school girls as a student teacher because they thought he looked like PETA from the Hunger Games. He had to be escorted in and out of the building just for his safety. This kept us engaged and entertained as he took whatever concept we were learning about and applied it to real or made-up stories. My junior year, I had Mr. Beard for psychology and current issues. He helped his students develop ideas and made his classroom a place that welcomed all sorts of different opinions and discussions. Mr. Beard's easygoing personality and knowledge of his subjects made me excited to come to 7th period every day. I loved how Mr. Beard tried to form a relationship with me and other students outside of the classroom by talking to us in the hallways and also conversing with me during class. Because he made it so easy to relate with him, I would come to him for advice. I could count on him to understand me, but also tell me how things were. My senior year, I decided to take his AP Micro-Macro Economics class and be his teacher's assistant. I often got frustrated with the material because I couldn't understand it right away. Nonetheless, Mr. Beard was patient with me and was willing to go to any length to help me understand the material. I could come in early, stay after class, come in for AC, get help during my TA period, or email him after hours. He made sure all of his students knew that he was always available to help. His classes pushed me to challenge my own beliefs and to use my own critical thinking skills. What I loved about Mr. Beard is that he was and is still truly passionate about his profession. He was always innovating and improving his techniques to make his classroom run more efficiently and interactively. Students participated in activities that incorporated whatever social, psychological, or economic phenomenon we were learning about, and he ensured participation from every student by spontaneously sparking interaction with them. He made the students in his classroom comfortable enough to formulate an opinion and engage with the content and their classmates. He balanced his classroom with diversion and discipline. Not a minute of classroom time was wasted, and he also made his content enjoyable. Not only does he put time into his classes and being a coach, but he also takes master's classes on his own. Students are drawn to Mr. Beard's hardworking, respectful, compassionate, and outgoing personality. Mr. Beard not only accepted me for who I was, but he embraced it. He accepted my frustration, my stress, my opinions, and even my humor. Showing interest in getting to know me outside of class made me deeply respect him and have a better teacher-student relationship in the classroom. It made him more approachable. He was someone I could go to about anything, and he would let me speak my mind. He showed me that he truly cared about me as a person and also cared about my education and well-being. The hardest part about graduating for me is leaving teachers like him who have impacted me so much in these past years. Teachers who have really done so much more for me than just teach. Even though I'll be graduating, Mr. Beard will be one of the few educators that I will keep in contact with for further advice and communication. It is clear that Mr. Beard exudes the highest of morals and holds himself to the highest of standards. My ultimate goal is to be passionate about my job and positively impact and interact with others, just like Mr. Beard does every single day. I will always remember his funny stories and positive attitude in class every day. If all educators were as influential and exemplary as Mr. Beard, our education system would be of the finest quality and merit. Mr. Beard, I am truly honored to have had you as a teacher for 3 years out of my 4 years in high school. Thank you for believing me and being just the teacher us teenagers need most of the time, someone who can just listen.
Thank you, Mary. You think of something to say like Ms. Kilgore was talking about earlier, and then you hear that and you're just kind of at a loss for words. I would like to thank everyone who helped put this on, the Lions Club, school board and guidance. It's an honor to be here. Coming from a small town like I do and being able to serve the community in the capacity that I do, it's a real honor to get to work with these kids. I'd also like to thank my wife because she's always there to support me no matter what and help me work with these kids in the way that I do. This senior class is a special group of kids. You got a lot of leaders, a lot of hard workers, and I can't think of anybody who best exemplifies this class than Mary Sears does. Because Mary Sears is one of the best people that you will ever meet.
And as a high school senior, it's incredible what she is able to do, because Mary puts her whole self into whatever she's going to attempt, and she has such a caring heart when she does it. I watched Mary work her way to the top of her class and put hours into studying, and accept nothing short of mastery in her subjects. I watched Mary volunteer all over Indianapolis, go to Guatemala twice to help impoverished families there and work through issues. Having her for 3 years, Mary was the kid in class who always asked the tough questions and who always did the right things. She was always asking, Mr. Beard, why is this the way it is? Mr. Beard, how do we find the answer to this question? Mr. Beard, what else can I do? And as an educator, I am going to miss that in my class when she's gone. And Mary, thank you for picking me, but it has been an honor to get to know you these last 3 years as your educator. And, keep smiling, kid, because you are going to get everything you've ever wanted out of life. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Mr. Beard. Again, Mrs. Borum just pointed out to me that I did not say Mary's school, but that was probably a Freudian slip. It's Purdue University. I attended IU, so we probably purposely did that subconsciously, I would say. But she will be attending Purdue University and majoring in nursing. Mr. Beard talked about Mary's asking the tough questions and making him a better educator. And I was in the classroom actually at the beginning part of the school year, and it was actually an AP course, an AP science course, and to watch Mary ask the teacher questions about the subject area, you can see her passion and her yearning for learning. So again, continue to do all that you are doing, Mary. We wish you nothing but the best in your future endeavors, and as Mr. Beard said, everything should be coming, everything you're working for will be coming to you if you continue to put in that hard work and continue to care about others as you have done throughout high school. You've heard a constant theme through through all of the speeches and through each of these students' recognition of their educators, and that theme has been relationships. Speedway prides itself on establishing relationships with each and every student that enters our corridors. And an evening like tonight reminds us of how important those relationships are. As we close, I leave you with two quotes that I think epitomizes our school community. The quotes come from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and the other quote is from Dr. James Comer, a child psychiatrist who's actually an Indiana native from the region. And I'll leave you first with Dr. King's quote. He said, "The function of education is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. Intelligence plus character is the goal of true education." Dr. James Comer said, "No significant learning occurs without a significant relationship." And I think those quotes epitomizes what our educators do each and every day for these wonderful students that you have entrusted us with to educate, not only in the subject area, but also in other areas of life. I would like again to thank the Lions Club for sponsoring this wonderful event. I thank our school leadership, our central office, the admin team, and especially the guidance team for putting together and meeting with these students and going over essays and trying to help them verbalize and articulate what each of their educators have truly meant to them. That will conclude our evening. We were asked the lovely ladies of Aramark to come and set up, and then I will come back to the microphone and dismiss you or send you to the tables individually as they get a chance to set up. So enjoy each other's fellowship and company, and I will be back on the microphone momentarily. Thank you for a wonderful evening. I really appreciate it.